Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the second session that we have here for a guide to virtual music ensembles. If you weren't able to be with us last week, we covered a lot of essential questions when it comes to looking at a project like this, and sort of some good framing for ways to think about how to create a virtual ensemble with whether it's with a general music class or with a large ensemble or a small ensemble. And so today we're going to be digging into more of the technology heavy explanations and guided some guidance from our guest presenter, Josh Lund. And Josh, again, is an elementary school music educator in MSAD 49, which is Benton, Clinton, Albion, Fairfield. Did I miss any towns?
That's
Josh,
it.
did I get them all?
Good job.
Okay, rock and roll. I did my homework. And for those of you that aren't familiar with who I am, everybody I think on this call is. I'm Jason Anderson. I'm your visual performing arts content specialist at the Department of Education. So as always, and Josh actually asked for this before some of you came on the call, if you could in the chat, if you could put your name and what you teach or where you teach, and if you know specifically what equipment you're working with in terms of technology, whether it's a Mac or a PC, if you could put that information in the chat, that will help us as well as we think about future sessions to really make sure that we can target your specific needs. And you're going to have an opportunity in today's exit ticket as well to give us more information about that as well, because we are thinking about future sessions about when you get your files back from students, or if we even need to do another technology session before the year starts, which for some of you, I think it starts next week if you're up in the county particularly. So, but we are going to have a pretty full presentation today. So if you have any questions that come up along the way, pop them in the chat, and we may have time to address them all at the end, or we may run out of time. But I want to give Josh the floor so that he can get working on presenting a lot of different things to you. You're going to leave probably with more questions than you came with, actually. But if you want to get a pencil and paper handy, or at least be able to split screen so that you can type notes while he's giving his presentation, that's going to be great. And I know, Josh, you're going to share your presentation slides with everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to drop that link in right now, just in case I forget. So the link that I'm going to be dropping into you is the link to the presentation. You should be able to view it. And that's going to be really helpful because I'm in a lot of places. I've linked in some links to products, microphones and things. And I've also made some little YouTube videos of the demonstrations that I'm going to do for you here in a little bit. So you can at least have those to go back to. So as Jason said, my name is Josh Lund. I teach elementary music. I do 1 through 6 general chorus. I do 4, 5, 6 chorus and a musical theater program. I also do I work with a lot of our high schools groups at Lawrence High School and try to be involved in kind of all levels as much as I can. I took on this project back in the spring. I started the main virtual choir back in the spring as part of an effort just to give people stuff to do, not knowing what schools were going to do and things. Learned a lot, made a ton of mistakes. And as I said last week, I'm about to present you an hour and a half worth of my mistakes so you can learn from them. I say that jokingly, but it's really true. Almost everything I'm going to say to you is stuff that I realized through the process of producing a virtual choir. And that I'm hoping will help you be able to do this successfully with your kids if you so choose. So let's jump into my presentation. Share screen. Here we go, sharing. So now you can see my stuff. All right. Presenting. So I think Jason said already, please, any questions you have, don't wait on them, put them in the chat. And I'll try to keep an eye on it, and Jason will throw them out to me if they're really important and I haven't addressed them yet. So this is going to be a very technical thing today. computers and click tracks and mics. Oh my. So I'm going to start with kind of a tech overview and talking about some of the computer side stuff. No, you didn't. I didn't put it in yet. That's my bad. I'm sorry. Like I said, I wanted to do it before I forgot. So that link is now in the slides. That link is now in the chat. I apologize. I'm going to start with talking about the tech side. We'll talk about the hardware, how computers work a little bit, and then all the different software options that you have. And when I say all, the ones that I'm suggesting for today and the ones I'm familiar with, there's a lot more. We'll go through some of the details of creating the guide tracks that your students would use. We'll talk about kind of some different ways that you might want to deal with handling those files and getting stuff back and forth to your students. And I've got a bunch of stuff I put together about microphones and kind of some guidance that you can use and can give to your students for that. There's a lot to get through, so I will try to not go too fast. And if at any point I am going too fast, please put it in the chat or just yell out to me, and I will try to adjust. So I wanted to start with this little analogy I have. If you're not super familiar with computers, I like to say that I like to use like a workshop, a garage workshop, as a great analogy for how computers work. And this will kind of be relevant as we talk about a few things later on. In your computers, pretty much all computers have three main components that they need to run. They have more than that, but three that we're going to talk about. You have your processing units, called your CPU and GPU, and that's kind of like the actual person, the brains of the operation. And when you input your stuff, when you click on the keyboard or use the mouse, that tells the CPU and GPU what they need to do. So your worker, your processors, they go to your storage. You probably have an internal storage, some sort of hard drive or what's called a solid state drive, and that's where all of the information for all your programs is kept. So your processors, they go over to this storage drive and they pull all the information they need to run the program, and they pull any files that they need to work on. So in our case, it pulls the data it needs to start the editing program you're using, and it pulls the specific file you're working on at the moment. And all of that can only happen on the work table. What I'm referring to as the work table. The computer component is called your RAM, your random access memory. So your computer can only do as much as you have space for in the RAM. Basically, it takes the files and works on them there, and as you're done with one thing, it goes and puts it back and takes out another piece. The problem that a lot of people will run into with their devices, and I noticed a lot of you said you have MacBook Airs, is that if you don't have enough RAM, you're going to start to see your computer slow down and have a lot of lag, because that processor is trying to go back and forth between your storage and the RAM, and it can't move the information fast enough. So the natural response there is to add more RAM, which is not always an option. I think a lot of you are going to want to ask your schools to provide you another device to work with if you're working with a larger group. So that's where this next one comes in. We're going to just talking about some devices and stuff. If you have a smaller ensemble that you're working with, if you're doing this for a general music scenario and you're doing, you've got 15 kids, or even if your band or chorus is pretty small and you're working with 10, 15, maybe 20 at the most, you'll probably be okay with something like a MacBook Air. Anything beyond that, you're going to start to run into some issues. Doesn't mean you can't do those things on those slower devices, but they're going to slow down and you're going to have a bit of a hard time as you get further into the project. Absolutely anything that has a microphone and camera, if they want video, can be used to record the audio. So for your students, it does not matter what they have. If they have Chromebooks, if they have iPads, if they're using their mom's old cell phone, that will be fine. Because you can, when you do the audio editing, you can clean up a lot and hide a lot of the poor microphone sounds that might come from those devices. So for your students, don't worry about what they're using. For you, if you're editing, these are some base on this left side here, these recommended editing computer specifications. You don't have to worry too much about these specific things. If you're talking to your tech team, you could write this down and show them this and basically say, this is something that was recommended to me. Is it possible to get something that is in this category? These are different types of processors and your RAM. Most of the MacBook Airs have 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's what this GB means. Don't worry about the CPU, GPU information. That's just for the tech people. But RAM is pretty relevant. So most of the MacBook Airs and Chromebooks have 2 or 4 gigabytes. You're going to want something with 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes or more is recommended. Again, that's something you'll have to kind of talk out with your tech people and your administrators to see what they'll be capable of. Most new brand name PCs will be able to handle all of the audio and video editing stuff, as long as you've got at least that 8 gigabytes of RAM. And I'm happy to help you out if you've got some detailed situation where you can email me. My information is later. And if you just want a suggestion and me to say, go buy this, these are my 2 suggestions here for if you need a Mac. The ideal situation that guaranteed will work for everyone in every situation is the MacBook Pro 16-inch. And that's overkill for a lot of situations. But for those of you who have the bigger ensembles, if you're looking at putting 80, 100 or more into one file, you're going to want something more powerful like that. If you're a PC person, something like the Dell XPS 15 is a really good option as well. That Dell is around $1,500, and the MacBook I think is close to $2,000. Those are not cheap devices, but they are incredible computers, and they will work really well for our purposes and for a ton of other stuff. Okay, so that's kind of the hardware question. I know a lot of you were wondering about devices and things. So stop.
And Josh, if I could,
Yes.
for just a second before we go to the next slide, I put information in the chat about this. So, 2 things to keep in mind. If you think that somewhere down the line you may expand some of your curricular programming or opportunities that you have to include recording arts or digital recording technology, in making an investment in this equipment would be a fantastic choice to make. And remember, too, that coronavirus relief funds that are granted to each district by Congress or to each state, which then gives it to every district, your administrators for your district have already submitted the budget or a plan, but they can amend that to accommodate purchases like this. So if this is something that you want to make sure happens, I would definitely go and talk with them soon about it. And all purchases and equipment needs to be received by December 30th if it's going to be reimbursable through CRF funds. So anyway, just want to throw that out there. So don't think that, well, I don't have any money in my budget to buy this. This is definitely qualifies as a reimbursable expense through CRF.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. And I love your comment there about planning for the future and potentially having technology and production pieces being part of your curriculum in the future. It's something that I think is really great to teach to high school students. I did my student teaching with Andy Forster at Messalonsky, who does a music production course. There really is a lot of great things that you can do as a general music offering for those upper level students. You may want to reach out to him over there for some more information about that. Software options. So I put this little flow chart together because the question of what program you use is incredibly subjective based on your situation. Most of you are on Macs, so I'm going to talk about this top section here first. On the Macs, you pretty much have two options. There's GarageBand and iMovie, which are the free programs that come on your Mac. They're free and they're pretty great, but they're limited. They do have some limits in terms of features. So you can still put in a large amount of files, and do those really big files and create big things in GarageBand and iMovie. But you won't be able to do all the fancier things that you might want to do. As I said last week, remember, you want to start with your finished product in mind. Figure out what you want it to be and how big of a project are you thinking and how fancy do you want it to look? And that's going to kind of help answer this question, because the higher end option for Mac users is Logic and Final Cut Pro. These are expensive. The retail cost is $500. It's $300 for Final Cut, $200 for Logic. I'm quite sure there's a steep educator discount, and as Jason was saying, that can probably be lumped in with the CRF funds. You just have to make sure you budget for it. Those programs are a little less user-friendly, but they are fully unlocked professional grade programs that can do anything you could possibly want them to do. So yeah, in a GarageBand, if the question is user friendly, it's GarageBand and iMovie all the way. That's what they're designed for, and that's Apple's thing, is to make things the most user oriented that they can be. Logic and Final Cut, they basically take away some of the they take away the training wheels, I guess, and let you really access the deep capabilities of those programs. For those of you that are on PCs, there are many more options than this, but you can, these are the ones I would suggest you think about. So if you're looking for free programs, I think the best programs you can find are Audacity. This is a free DAW, a digital audio workstation. This can do everything that GarageBand can do and everything that Adobe Audition can do. It's just not as pretty. Audacity is not a pretty program, and you're going to see it in a few minutes. But there are tons and tons of resources to help you use it. You can go on YouTube and you can go on the wiki articles for all the help resources you could ever imagine. So that's where you would do all of your audio work. DaVinci Resolve is one of my favorite free video editors. For those of you that are on PC, it's a fairly big program, but this is free. And there is a premium version that you can buy, and I think that's like $250, and that's a lifetime purchase. But even the free version is incredibly powerful, and I've made quite a few videos using it. And this absolutely could create your videos, no matter how big you were trying for it to be. And then the other option, and this is available on Mac as well, is using the Adobe Suite. And this might be a good option for some of you. This is what I'm actually using right now. I've used DaVinci a lot and Audacity in the past, but I started purchasing the subscription for Adobe Suite this year because of the Virtual Ensemble project. Adobe uses a subscription model. So that is, you pay one price, but that covers I think 28 or 30 different programs that you can use. And the two that you would focus on for this thing are Premiere Pro, which is the video editor, and Audition, which is the audio editor. But it comes with Photoshop and Lightroom and all kinds of animation and creation apps of every kind. So if you really want to get something that you can just dig into and play around with and create all kinds of amazing creative things, Adobe Suite it might be worth it. There's an educator discount. The normal price is, I think, $60 a month, but I'm paying, I think, $20 a month as an educator. So that could be an option for you. There are some web-based DAWs as well. These are just audio. You can do small projects using those. I forgot to even put the names there. Soundtrap and Soundation, and BandLab they're pretty good for small projects, and students my students have had a great time with them. They work great on Chromebooks. They work okay on iPads. So if you have iPads, so for smaller projects, using one of those web-based programs like Soundtrap probably would work well for you. But if you're doing anything more than like 10, I wouldn't bother. Okay. So I think that's a good place to kind of stop on the technical stuff with hardware and software. Any major questions that I can answer right now before we get into the next part of this? So Rick Nickerson did point out that Final Cut does have a 90-day free trial. If you do want to test it out, it's a big program, and that might be a great way to take advantage of it. And remember, Final Cut is one of the Mac programs. Yep. Thank you, Jason. Jason added in the Soundtrap link.
And what were the other two, Josh? And I just want everybody to know we're not, the disclaimer from the department is we're obviously not pushing product, but we're just making sure that everyone is aware of what's out there in different price points at different levels. Because again, like Josh has said throughout this presentation and the one last time as well, it's not going to be a one size fits all for everybody. So we just want to make sure that you are aware of what's out there for free resources. So Soundation is the other one, in BandLab. I'll pull the links for that. So
thank you. So, and I know Soundtrap and Soundation for sure are this, and I think BandLab is the same. They all are free to use with a subscription available. If you're using the free version, it's obviously going to be more limited. The subscriptions are all pretty cheap, and they do have educator plans and rates. And I know with Soundtrap, at least it lets you set up like classes and do the teacher student model instead of just everyone having kind of a blank account. So, and there's a lot of things that you can do with those systems. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm going to move on into talking about kind of the guide track piece of this. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of the hardware and software. And if you get into a situation and you're not sure, please feel free to send me an email or find me on Facebook. And I will try to answer your questions the best I can. Again, my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. So, as we talked about last week, when you're doing a virtual ensemble, you're going to need to create a guide track for your students. So this is what they are going to listen to as they do their recording. And there are a lot of different options depending on who you are and what you're doing. You could create an accompaniment, could record accompaniment stuff for them to listen to and sing along to. You can create a MIDI track. You can do click tracks. Whatever you're trying to do, I would highly suggest you keep your scores right with you as you're creating those. And all the way through, I think that sounds like an obvious thing, but people don't always do the obvious things. So when you're creating all that stuff, just make sure you keep your scores nearby. Something you're going to need to do, unless you want to spend endless hours adjusting audio and trying to synchronize things, include some sort of synchronizing sound. So the main virtual choir, what I did is I had our conductor clap. He clapped on camera, on video, and what I gave, the instructions I gave the participants were to leave their headphones unplugged and turn the volume up so that that clap was recorded into their recording, and then plug their headphones in and then start singing in that case. You can do it a bunch of different ways. You can ask them to sing, and you can ask them to clap, and just to clap in at a certain time so they don't have to deal with their headphones. And I'll talk about how to set that up in a couple minutes. You could also simply, give them instruction, count them in and have them play 4 quarter notes to a metronome or something, something like that. But you're going to want to set up some sort of sound that you can use to go and synchronize those files, because you later on when you get into your programs, we'll talk about it. You literally can look at the sound, look at the waveforms, and just visually line them up, and that will save you a ton of time.
So Josh, the whole point of the sound again, or the clap, is to give you a visual on the audio wave form, right, so you can line everything up.
Yep. Well, I'm going to show you that in a couple minutes, because you'll have to do it when you set up your guide track in a couple of different ways. So Melinda, I'll go back and clarify that. There's multiple ways that you can set up the synchronizing track. What I did was I asked the participants to start, because I asked them to sing using a video. And I told them they had to have their headphones on, but they would press record and then play this YouTube video that I had it set up with. Unplug their headphones while they're recording so that the video playing will play the clap sound, record it into their recording, then plug their headphones in. So the rest of it, they heard the accompaniment in their ears, but it was recording their voice without hearing anything else. And that's so you didn't get extra sounds in the recording that you didn't want to. Because if they don't use headphones, you're going to get the sound from the speakers into the recording, and that's going to cause extra sound and feedback and going to make everything really messy. And I'll kind of show you more of that in a little bit. Okay. Most of you probably will want to create a video of yourself conducting, because we conduct and that's kind of one of our things. And I'm just going to give this advice right now. I'm going to talk about instruments in a couple of minutes. If you want to conduct with your click track or accompaniment or whatever, highly suggest to make the audio first and then conduct to whatever audio track you've made. We are not perfect metronomes. We are not perfect anything. And especially if you're using a MIDI track or click track that is going to be metronomically perfect, make sure that your conducting is aligned to that, or you're going to cause yourself some problems. Okay, so I actually broke this up into choral specific considerations and then instrumental considerations. So this is focusing on the choral people right now. You have for all of you, no matter what you're doing, you have options. Choral people, one option you may have that you may want to use is to have the kids sing with the professional track. On JW Pepper, sometimes there's those professionally made PA CDs, I think they're called. You can purchase that track and use the CD and use that to send to your students and have them sing along with that professional version. That is absolutely the easiest thing to set up. No questions about it. Those aren't always available for every piece you may want to do. And for me, in my own personal taste, I feel like those CDs, they're very inauthentic, and they kind of lose some of the magic of live music in a live scenario. I kind of like the natural piano. That's me personally. You can do it any way you want to. You can record your accompanist, whether that's yourself playing or if you have an accompanist. do that with audio only or audio and video. I think there's some great pros to doing it that way. You can, in that scenario, you as the director, you can make sure that recording is exactly how you want it, the rubato and all those kind of expression things that will really help make it really, really musical, easier to modify. And I think it's good for the students to hear the same sounds consistently, and be able to learn in smaller chunks and not have, I think that's easier all the way around in a lot of ways. The cons that can come with recording that accompaniment, you can run into recording issues if you have to think about video and microphone placement. If your tempos are not consistent, that can be more difficult for some of your students. And especially if you're, depending on what kind of a pattern you like to use, it may make things more difficult with kids seeing and with seeing your beats and making sure that everything's all together. I would highly suggest simplifying your patterns to be kind of as clear and precise as you can be. I know a lot of us choral folks like to really get flowy, but that's just harder to follow. So, and the other issue that you run into is social distancing with you and your accompanist. So if you and your accompanist cannot be in the same room together, if you can't be there conducting with your accompanist, as I was saying earlier, let your accompanist record first, give them a guide, an idea what you want it to be, and then make your video after. And I say that because in our case with the virtual choir, my conductor, he recorded a video of himself doing it in silence because he knew the piece really well. I sent it to my pianist, and it turned out to be a lot harder to accompany to a video of someone conducting than she was expecting. And that was Laura Artisani, one of the most amazing accompanists that any of us know, I believe. So yeah, any of you who know Laura, like, she had a hard time conducting to a video, like without that personal interaction. It's something I never would have thought of, but I think it's just a lot harder than anyone would really realize. So if you're doing choral stuff, you need that accompaniment. You may be able to get professional accompaniment tracks that work really well for you. I think most of you will end up recording something. And those are a few things to think about there. So for instrumental folks, a lot of times there's professional recordings of your stuff as well, depending on what you're doing and what level. That might be an option depending on the level of your students, is to give them that professional recording and have them play along with that. Probably won't be an option for a lot of us. I know those professional recordings are often exactly at the tempo marking or 10 to 20% faster. And for a lot of us in this weird situation, technical skills may not be there. So that may not be an option, but it's something you can consider. This next one is an option for choral people as well, depending on what you're doing. You can create MIDI tracks using whatever notation program you like to use. So in that case, you could open up Finale or Sibelius, or even Note Flight or Flat, if you're familiar with those. Those are web-based notation programs. And write out your melody and write out your bass line and maybe one of the harmony things. And you can then export that MIDI playback from those programs and let your students play along with that. Obviously, you're not going to want to rewrite the whole score in that program, but you can just kind of simplify it to a melody and a bass line, whatever you want it, whatever you think your students need. If your piece is quite a bit longer, that's probably not going to be a great option. Depending on the level of your kids, you can use click tracks, and you can use click tracks in conjunction with MIDI and other stuff if you want to. Click tracks are just metronomical clicks. And I'm going to show you how to make those here in just a second. I'm going to guess most of us are familiar with some notation software, so I'm not going to go into much more detail on the MIDI thing. Click tracks, you set up your clicks and give the instructions how to get started and go. For instrumental people, depending on what you're doing, it might be an option for you to just record yourself on video conducting and not give them any audio guide. Depending on, again, it depends on your situation, depends on what you're doing. So let's jump into, this is a video I made showing you click tracks. I'm not going to show you that right now. That's just there so you can go back to it later. I'm going to jump out of the presentation and I'm going to jump into Audacity. So as I said earlier, I am on a PC. I don't have a Mac. Maybe I didn't say that. I forgot to, but I don't have a PC. I don't have a Mac here at home. I thought we might be able to be into school by now, and when I can get into school, I can borrow a Mac. But right now, I'm still at home on my PC. So I don't have access to GarageBand and iMovie, which I know a lot of you use. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to try to give you an overview of how all of these programs work, because all of the audio programs will work similarly. They look very different, but they'll work similarly. This is called Audacity, and this is what I would suggest for using for PC-based audio work. It's a completely free program, and it really is incredible. Like I said, it's ugly. It's an ugly program, but it works really, really well. So a couple of things we can do is I can, add as many tracks as I want to. If you're not familiar with how DAWs work, the basic idea, you've got all your controls on Audacity. They're up at the top. I know I think in GarageBand, they're down near the bottom. All your play, stop, start, rewind, your record buttons. In Audacity, it's set up using a tool system where you have to select which tool you want to use to do certain things. And if I want to record, I have to make sure one of these tracks is selected. So now I've selected that first track, and I'm going to rename this. So I can click right here where it says audio track and name it vocal instructions for what I'm going to do. Yep. So I can now go in and make sure this first track is selected. Whoops. And hit record. Okay, so now you can see as this header's moving along, it's recording my voice, and the blue wavy things in here are the actual waveforms from my voice. So there we go, and I hit stop, and now that's recorded, and I can play back. Okay, so now you can see. I don't know if you can hear that playing back on your end, but all right, so you guys can hear that? Good? Good. Doesn't have to be super loud, but all right, now I'm going to delete that because I don't need it. So what I would do here is if I wanted to create my audio for a click track or whatever, I probably would start with explaining the instructions. So I'm going to start by setting up my synchronizing sound. So I'll explain that I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and then clap on 4. I'd like you to clap with me, right? So I'll do something like this. This is the guide recording track for the song we're doing in band. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and then clap on 4. Please clap at the same time I do. 1, 2, 3. So I just stopped there. Now I've recorded my introductory stuff. Okay? This is the guide recording track for the song we're doing in band. So I also have these really weird gaps in the sound here. So I'm going to use my select tool that looks like the two little lines and select this empty space and then hit the scissors button to delete it, to cut those out. And the breathing at the beginning, I'm going to do the same thing. I have the select tool picked and then hit the cut button. So that just got rid of some of the empty space there. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and then clap on 4. please clap at the same time I do. 1, 2, 3. So that would be the first thing I would do to make sure that you've got your synchronizing sound set up. So now I'm going to put my playhead here so I can start recording again. And then explain the next part, which is going to be click tracks. Audacity is the only program I've found that has an easy way to do click tracks. So even if you're a Mac user on GarageBand, I'm going to suggest you download Audacity for this one feature alone. I'm going to go to the Generate button up at my top of the screen here and choose a rhythm track. Now, this is the part that I have a video in the presentation for you showing you how to do this. So if you miss something, you can always go back and check that out. I'm going to create a rhythm track, and this is really neat. You can set your tempo. Say that my song is 92, 92. I can move this little slider, or I can just type in. We're in 4/4, so that's fine. And say that we're doing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It's 8 measures, right? I think so. I'm going to put in 9 measures because I'm going to have 1 measure of count in to help my students know where to start. So I'm going to select 9 measures. I'm going to put in 9 measures. If you're a jazz person, there's a function to add swing into this as well. I just thought that was really, really neat. You can actually change the sound that you use that comes out of this for the clicks and everything. Don't worry too much about that. So I'm going to hit OK. Whoops, what's an empty value? Oh, I forgot to put 0 back for swing. Okay, so now that's created a click track, and I made sure to select my second track, second channel here. That's not quite where I want it, so I'm going to use this time shift tool. And with that, I can move this around. Some programs, GarageBand, I don't think has that. I think you can just click on anything and move it. You'll have to learn kind of the different things for your specific program. So if I play this over here, there's my click track. You get beat 1, and you can change that so those sound the same if you don't want that strong beat 1 in there.
Is it the default, Josh, that beat 1 is the dominant beat?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's cool.
Let me go back and all you would have to do is change the beats per bar to 1, and then it would give everything the same feel. As far as I know, there's no functionality in this that would allow you to do compound or odd time signatures, 7/8 or anything like that. If you really wanted to, you could put sets of 3 and 4 together and then copy and paste. Way more work than it's worth, probably. But I can't imagine anyone's going to be doing Vesuvius or anything like that over a virtual ensemble. So the next thing I would do here is I would come back to my first track, and I would want to start recording here near the end and say something like, go ahead, Josh, please show me how it's done. And what I might say, oops, I might actually hit record instead of play. My apologies. You're going to hear 3 clicks, breathe on 4, and then play on 1. So now I started talking and that thing started playing. So now I need to move those over. And I'm actually going to move it a little more and line up what I would want to do is speak over the clicks. So I might start this here and want to record and say 1, 2, 3. Do something like that. Let's see if this lined up right. I don't think it did. Okay. So I might have to make a cut here, but that's fine. There's a lot of little things you can do to split this stuff up. Whoops. I'm not super familiar with Audacity, by the way. It's been a while since I've used it. So you would absolutely want to go and look up the best way to do what you need to do at that time. All right, so if I now play this, 1, 2, 3, and then you've got something that your students can follow along with and then play along. You can hear, you get the audible breath, which a lot of students really utilize. You know, if you were doing, for choral people, if you're doing something like this, you might do something very similar where you give these instructions and then you just give a verbal count if you're not using a click track, as you know, give a verbal count as you're conducting. So you can then use those basic ideas. Audacity can create way more tracks if you wanted to do a ton more stuff and add layers and levels to this. There's a ton of stuff you can do, but that would be the basic idea of creating a click track. And any of your kind of audio work, you're probably going to want to start in Audacity. When you're done with this, obviously you can save, but when I save, it brings up this little message. This is, if you go to save, you're only saving an Audacity project. You're not saving an audio file. If you want to get an audio file that you can use somewhere else, you have to export it. Go to the export option and export it as an MP3. Now, if you're in GarageBand or any other program, the process is going to be fairly similar. Almost all of them use the same export thing. You know, you have to export, not just save. They almost all will have the same type of track setup. So your questions here. I use Adobe Audition because I've been using the Adobe suite. Before I was using Adobe, I was using Audacity. But I haven't had to do a lot of this kind of heavy work. The question was, what do I use instead of Audacity? I use the Adobe suite, which I'm not showing that today because that's the paid service that I know a lot of you probably won't end up using. Can the click track started, then stop and have the guide track keep going? Yeah, so you absolutely can cut. You can make cuts in your click track anywhere you want to. Let me see where there's a thing you would want to split the track, and I can never remember where it is in Audacity because Audacity does it a little bit differently. But yeah, you can split the thing and you can split the tracks up and move them wherever you want. Sherry, there's a ton of flexibility in this. You just have to kind of set it up the way you want. And Carol, yeah, you may want to record the audio of your metronome. That might work, depending on how you're set up. This, you know, I think having it generated like this gives you a little bit of flexibility in how the things sound, but you do it the way you want to. Audacity is really great because it is quite flexible. And if you're using GarageBand, you can do the same thing. GarageBand does have a similar feature to this, but what I looked up seemed a lot more complicated than just opening this, going to generate rhythm track and being able to do that. So you create your audio file, you export it, you go record yourself in a video, and then you've got to put your audio and your video together. And that's the next thing we're going to look at. Adding video to your guide track. So you record your file, record it on your phone or whatever. You have to make sure you get the file off your phone or camera or whatever device you used and get it onto your computer. The way you do that depends on your device. If you're on an iPhone and you recorded it there, you can use iCloud or add it to Google Drive or something like that. Taking a lot of time. I got to start speeding up here. Adding a video track. I'm going to open Resolve. So Resolve is the free video editor that I have, and it works kind of similarly to how the audio stuff works, except this one's a lot prettier, and I think this is a lot more like what iMovie or Final Cut would be. DaVinci is this is the free version of a professional program. Oh, it's loading up. I forgot to have it preset. I have a demo file pre-done. So in a video editor like this, there's a few things you need to know. You'll have the same track options down here. These are where your channels will be, but now you have audio and video. So I'm going to take one of my files up here. I preloaded some of these. I'm going to take this video down and drop it into the track, into the channels. And now I have my audio and video. The audio and video are linked together right now. So if I move them around, they stay together, but I can unlink them if I want. There's this little link button. He talks for a while, so I don't need to use any of that. So I'm going to find my cutting tool. Like I said earlier, there's this cutting thing. It's called something different in every program: blade, razor, cut tool, something. In DaVinci, it happens to be the blade tool. So I'm going to come down here, and I've got my blade tool selected. Click right here. And now this has split this into two different files. I want to go back to my select tool. So now I can select everything before the cut or after the cut. Now I'm just going to delete that using the backspace button. And so now I have my files, and this is just him conducting. And you'll hear there's a clap, but no audio, but no, nothing else, excuse me. So I now need my accompaniment. My accompanist also, for some reason, I think I didn't give her the right directions. She did not include the clap in her track. So I need to manually align it. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to the moment that he starts and gives his downbeat. This actually kind of starts on an upbeat, but then I'm going to look at the piano track and find the moment she starts, which if you look at the waveforms, is right about here. I'll need to cut this down a little bit and delete some, and then push this back so that that sound starts right in line with his hands. So that's not perfectly in sync. So I might want to make some little adjustments. And in all of these, you can kind of zoom in and zoom out to help you with that and get more fine details. So Pamela just asked a great question. And it is, when you edit the file in the program, does it also edit the original recording? And the answer is it depends, but normally no. So in DaVinci, at least, I have my original file. I have the audio file. And then over here in the media bin, it's created a new file called the timeline. And that's where all of these changes are being saved to. So everything that's done is done to the timeline file, not the original videos. So in this case, and in the vast majority of cases, it does not affect your original files. So I can go in and work to sync that up however I want to. The piano one, because there wasn't a clap there, it makes this a little bit more difficult. There we go. That's about the closest it's been. Now, this piece of music has another instrument, though. There's a cello part that's aligned to it. So I have to go add some new media, a new piece to it. So I'm going to import a file. If you're on GarageBand, it's going to be something similar where you import media. I have to go to my file folder here and find Beneath the Pines cello. So there was a cello part to the song as well. I'm going to add this in, and I want to add it in a new track, in a new channel, so that it doesn't cover up anything else. So I can mute my piano for a second. Now I want to align these claps. So let me kind of try to zoom in here as much as I can on this. This is the synchronization part. The synchronizing is, for the most part, just visually looking for these clap wave signatures. So I just tried to align those, and they weren't quite aligned. So now I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more so that I can see those. And if I zoom in more, you can see, yeah, they're not really that close. So if I take this and visually align it and then play it, those sound like one clap. So now my piano might be a little funky, but the cello is going to be pretty much in time when she comes in. Okay, so it's slightly off, but I can make small adjustments here. Right, it's still a little bit off, but that's a lot easier than having to manually find that place for everyone. Using these synchronizing sounds is going to get you a lot closer. So there's a ton of ways to play with the video. You can change the size of each video, and there are these different tabs in DaVinci, and it'll work kind of similarly in a lot of the other programs. At the bottom, you can go to do special effects, and you can tweak all the colors if you really want to be silly and kind of do some color stuff, and you can do all kinds of different things if you really want to, but that's not the purpose of this. In DaVinci and in any of these audio programs, any of these video programs, there's going to be an audio function here. And this is where you're going to end up doing a lot of your final mixing and editing. So I would do a lot of the synchronizing of the audio over in Audacity or in GarageBand, and then you'll drop it over here. And then we'll talk about this later on in our next session, I think, about doing the full group things. What I would really focus on for right now is using these programs to create your guide tracks. I saw some questions about solos and ensemble stuff, and I'll answer those in a few minutes, but focus for now on just what you have to do to create a guide track that you can give to your students. And then you can export this. DaVinci and most of these programs has presets to set it out to go to YouTube and stuff. So that'll work really, really well. That was a ton of tech demonstrations. Remember, I have those videos that go back on some of those details, and I hope some of you took notes. That will be helpful for you. These programs are incredibly powerful. That's a good picture of my son, you think? Yeah. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. We don't need to play any games right now. Yep. So I'll grab so this question, solis, yeah. So yes, solos and solis, you absolutely can cut and choose the better tracks that you want to do. You can pre-record it if you want to. You can so Jennifer, the answer to your question is whichever way you want to do it. And Lauren, yes, you will have to synchronize each video for all of your members. Now, you can keep the audio and video synced so that as long as you focus on that audio, the video will stay with it, and you won't have to really do much with that. So you can, you'll have to put them all together in the big file. And the bigger groups you have, the more time you're going to have to sync into this. I won't spend a lot of time on these next few things because I want to give you some time for questions. File management. So you're going to create your files. You're going to create your audio, video thing that you're going to send to your kids for them to work with. You'll spend time in your class, whatever class time you're able to have. I'm sure you'll spend some time teaching all these things. But these are kind of my thoughts for doing this. You got to make it as easy as you can. For most of you, that's probably going to be Flipgrid or Google Classroom, or whatever Google Classroom equivalent you use. I know some schools use other things. You can post your guide tracks on YouTube, but you're probably not going to want to ask them to post their stuff on YouTube because permissions and all that stuff. But if you put your guide tracks on YouTube, even as an unlisted file, it might be a little easier for them to access depending on where they are. Google Classroom is really great for giving files and turning in files. Flipgrid is really great as well. You can give them the prompt, give them the assignment. They can record their video right in Flipgrid. It's great, already set up for teachers. So think about it and figure out what for your situation works best for how will they turn in their files through Google Classroom. What's going to be easiest to keep track of for you? How are you going to keep all of them organized? If you want them to, depending on the level of your kids, you may be able to get your students to self-organize into parts so that all your bases end up in one file. You can set those up in different ways. What will be easy for your kids? What are they capable of? I think most high school kids by now are pretty competent with the Google stuff. And what are they already familiar with? Most schools that I know of are doing Google stuff. Questions you're going to need to think about too, a few more. What file types are you working with? If you may have to switch some file types around. If kids are sending stuff from iPhones, you might end up with a weird file called HEVC, which works in some video programs but doesn't in others, and you'll have to figure out a way to convert that. Totally doable. There's easy ways to do it, but you'll just have to figure out what works for you there. And that can be something for another session to talk about. You can use your editors to do most of those conversions. Test everything. Figure out your plan. Figure out what you want your kids to do. Test it. Have a colleague go through the steps so as a student so that you can see how it works on their end and how in your end, because I guarantee you'll run into some issues that you weren't expecting. If you have some older students, maybe you're at a middle school and you can ask a few of the high school students to try something for you, that high school students that do it. And I would highly suggest talking to your tech team, tech administrator, whoever that is, about something called Google Drive File Stream. That's something that they have to enable for you, but it allows you to set up a folder on your computer that's stored locally, not in the cloud, and it will sync with Google Drive. So whatever's in your Google Drive that's available anywhere on any device also has a copy saved on your physical hard drive to your computer, so that even with no internet, those are available to you. That also means that you can access those files without having to go and log into Google and use the Google Drive interface, if that's something that you feel strongly about. The other questions, we had a lot of questions about microphones last week. So I put together this little guide, and this is not perfect by any means. This is not perfect by any means, but this gives you a place to start with. If for your singers, the best place to be is a closet. Lots of clothes, lots of soft materials to dampen the sound. And for everyone, I put this for the singers, but for everyone, make sure your recording device is stationary. Don't try to sing. Don't tell your kids, don't let them try to sing while they're holding their iPhone. Like, it's not cool. Don't do it. Brass, make sure you're 4 to 6 feet away and off axis. So off axis means this. So right now, I think you guys can see me. Yeah. So right now I'm using this microphone on axis. I'm going directly into it. If I was playing whatever it is, this is on axis. If I come over here like this is off axis. Just playing instead of right into the microphone, off at an angle, will make it so that you have a much better chance of not having awful sound when you record. Lots of soft materials, again, to soften the sound of the room would be great, especially for brass and percussion. And if possible, especially brass and percussion, using a microphone with gain control. So, or using an audio interface, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. If possible, use something basically that lets you turn down or turn up the sensitivity of the microphone. So for those louder instruments, trumpets, just make sure that they can turn that down so that they're not clipping. Clipping is what it's called when you hear the microphones get all crunchy because something's too loud. That's called clipping. It's bad for the microphone. It sounds bad. It's just bad all the way around. So for brass and percussion, I would suggest them trying to use, if you have one available, microphones with a gain control. But if they have to use the device they have, then space and playing off axis is going to be the best thing you can do. Okay. And lots of soft materials. If they can kind of like put whatever device they're using, set it on the couch so that, the couch catches some of that sound, and maybe hang up blankets around on the walls and stuff like that. That would be ideal. It's not always possible, but do the best you can. Woodwinds, it's much less of a concern. They can be loud, but stand away, use some of that soft material if you need to. So primary sound nodes, meaning like for clarinet, for example, most of the sound kind of comes from the middle and lower end of the body, right? It doesn't come from the bell. So you don't want to put the microphone right down below. The sound's coming out from the holes. Same for flutes and saxophones. Flutes and saxes in their extreme ranges, they may want to back off a little bit. Piccolos, especially, I forgot to put this. Piccolos are definitely going to want to be back away some and trying to use as much of that soft material as you can, because those high registered notes will cause clipping without as much volume. Strings, there's very little concerns. Stand a few feet away. They're just much softer in general, even at the loudest volumes of at the extremes of a violin or something. You can clip a microphone, but it's a lot harder to do. Percussion, good luck. Especially drum set, you're just going to have a hard time no matter what you do. I would highly suggest having them in a whatever size room you need to have that microphone placed on the other side of the room with a lot of padding in the room. If you can, get some padding in the bass drums. There's not a lot that you can do really to make it better without using a special mic setup for drum set. Do the best you can with that one. And for all of your other concert percussion, if your kids are able to record in your school building, nothing else is really as loud as drum set, but still give that space and hopefully it works out. Microphone options. So USB microphones. The one I'm using right here is the Audio-Technica 2100, ATR 2100. There's a newer version now, the 2100X. Highly recommend it. It's a USB microphone, but it also has an XLR port, so you can use it with your other sound systems, your traditional sound systems. If you're looking for just a USB mic, a Blue Yeti or a Samson Satellite are good examples. Blue Yetis you can get, people have them all over the place. They're not the best mics around, but they work well enough for pretty much anything you guys would ever want to be doing. The other option, if you already have microphones available in your system, if you have equipment, you can buy a USB audio interface. And basically this is a device that you plug those mics into, plug the XLRs into that, and then that has a USB that goes to your computer. If any of you have Zoom field recorders, like a Zoom H5 or an H6, that's an audio interface. And that's actually what I was using last week when I was talking to you. Today I'm on a different computer and I'm using a Behringer Euphoria 404 HD. I really like it. The Focusrite Scarlett is very, very highly recommended as well. The reason I bought the Euphoria, the Behringer, is because it also has MIDI input. And what that means is you can use a certain kind of cable to go from your digital keyboard, if you have one, plug that into this Euphoria interface, and not only can you now get your sound and microphone stuff into your computer, you also can get the input from your digital keyboard, so you can use your keyboard to play into something like GarageBand and record what you play using the sounds built into there, not using the digital effect, not the audio recording. So giving you the next thing I have here, if you what you have for microphones, you make do. There are disposable microphone covers available on Amazon, just little, they look kind of like hair shower caps. I cannot vouch for how they affect the sound. I have no idea. I would assume there would be some effect, but probably not too much. Those were like $15 or $20 for like 200. So not super expensive. These foam windscreens can be washed, but they have to dry for 3 days, because that's the minimum for guaranteed germ death. And you can sanitize the microphones themselves. You take 70% isopropyl alcohol, put some on a clean cloth and wipe it down. It's very, very important to not put the liquid directly on the microphone, because if it gets into the internals, it can completely ruin it. It's also important to use 70% instead of 90%, the 92% or whatever, because the higher content alcohol will evaporate too fast to actually clean the microphone. So as far as sharing microphones, it's possible. And you just figure out what you can do and what you have access to in terms of cleaning ability, and make that work. So when students submit their recordings, will we need to separate? I already answered that one, right? Yeah. You do not need to separate the audio from the video. Yeah, you do not need to do that. I think I answered that. Good. Someone mentioned last week, I think it was Terry Henry, Rehearsal Live Share. This is a really neat program. I did look into this. I threw this on at the end. So it's not a holy grail, but it has potential, has a lot of potential. What Rehearsal Live Share does is it accounts for the delay in the internet in one direction. We talked last week about how the sound takes milliseconds to get from me to you. You're hearing me probably 0.2 of a second after I actually speak. It's imperceptible in speech, but when we're talking about music and we need to be exactly together, that is a really, really detrimental thing. So what Rehearsal Live Share does is it allows each participant to hear a guide track. Basically, you put in your accompaniment, and if you're the director, you hit play, and each of the participants is going to hear their guide track, and they'll all start at approximately the same time, because it delays that just enough to account for the internet lag. And then each of the participants sings or plays their part back, and it delays it again by some milliseconds to allow and it delays and synchronizes. So that allows the director to hear everything in sync, everything at the same time. The participants, the singers, they cannot hear each other, and they cannot hear what the director hears. They only hear that accompaniment guide and themselves. But it still could have a lot of value for you, depending on what you're trying to do. It was designed for musical theater rehearsal situations, but that may be something you want to look into. Right now, it's limited to about 10 participants, just based on their capabilities. I didn't get far enough into looking at prices or anything like that, but that's what it does if anyone wants to look into it a little bit more. You got this. You'll get it. I hope you all take a breath, maybe get a drink or something after this, because this was a ton of information. Try things out, have fun, good luck. I really, really want to be helpful with this, and please reach out to me. I'm going to be doing an episode soon of the Mainly Music Ed podcast, where I'm going to talk about all this music, virtual ensemble stuff as well. If you haven't checked that out yet, it's a thing I host. It's the Mainly Music Ed podcast. I haven't done it in a while because the summer has been crazy, but I hope that it might be helpful to you. Here's my email, jlund@ms8049.org, and the Mainly Music Ed has kind of a Facebook community. There's quite a few music teachers in there. If you're not in it already, you can use that link right there to get to it. And I hope that some of this has been helpful. We got about 15 minutes here for questions. If you
this has been awesome, Josh. Thank you so much for that, for all of that dense info, but presented very very intelligently and step by step, which was helpful. And there is, as we covered last week, there's just so many different programs out there. There's so many different software and hardware configurations and microphone configurations, and depending on the size of your ensemble and what your room is, how your rooms are designed, and where you're going to have students doing these recordings, and the combinations are endless. So this is a hard topic that I didn't avoid addressing, but I had to find the right way to go about doing this, because it's just so much information that we could literally present dozens of sessions on all the different combinations and still not cover them all. But Josh, could you speak to us just a minute, just off the top of your head, about your thoughts on headphones, like earbuds versus headphones, or anything, particularly that you use? Or
so I have a pair of these are Audio-Technica M30Xs, I believe. I can't remember exactly. I really like them. For you personally, as a musician, and if you're doing editing, you're probably going to want to get a decent pair of studio headphones. These are around $100, I think. $150, something like that. You can get some really, really nice stuff in that price range that will sound really good. AirPods and the Apple EarPods and that kind of stuff, those are made for casual listening to music, conversational stuff. If you want to really hear high quality audio, and if you really want to be able to tell the difference of some of those minor tweaks that you might do when you're playing with the audio settings and playing with reverb and playing with different stuff, you might want a decent pair of headphones. I'm not going to say that you should absolutely go out and buy a good pair of studio headphones. It would probably be helpful, but it's not a necessity. Yeah, Bluetooth absolutely can have a lag. So mine are Audio-Technica MX30s, I think. Yeah, so if you're using something like AirPods or some other Bluetooth headphone, you definitely will have a lag of some amount. It's probably imperceptible in that case, but it will be there.
So in terms, Josh, of having your students using headphones, as long as they can hear the click track and the guidance and the clap and all of that accurately,
for your students, it doesn't matter.
That's not as big of an issue. But if you're looking to do very careful, I think it also depends too on what the level of sophistication of the sound that you're dealing with in terms of putting your mix together, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think I said last week, you got to think about what your community expects and what you want this to be. If you want it to sound like a true professional, type of thing, then you're probably going to want those nicer headphones and some of the nicer equipment, and really spend some time learning how to do some of the editing stuff yourself. I didn't really get into audio editing or video editing, for that matter, at all here. Yeah, so there's not really any perceptible latency issue with wired headphones. That won't be an issue. Earbuds, the latency you're talking about is in the tens of milliseconds rather than the hundreds of milliseconds. Like when the delay over the internet is hundreds of milliseconds. Could be, it could be anywhere from 80 to 500 milliseconds. The Bluetooth earbuds are going to be close to instantaneous. Not enough that you would even have to really bother with editing that amount of difference. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. The Audio Technica stuff. You can find all that on YouTube, on Amazon, not YouTube. Sorry. I get my big sites mixed up sometimes. Other questions, because we got just a few more minutes here, and I'm happy to try to clarify anything I can.
I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the exit ticket for today in the chat as well, because some people don't get to that before the end of the session. So I just want to make sure that everybody does get that. And just like last week, once you submit your form in the thank you message at the end, there will be another link that you may have to copy and paste into a browser, but it will take you to your professional development certificate for this session. So if you want to go ahead and click on that link right now in the chat, everybody, it should open up an additional tab in your browser. You may have to click back to the Zoom meeting.
It's not accepting responses yet, Jason.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's not. Again. Yeah. Sorry. I will switch that. But I would love it if you would attend to this over the next 48 hours or so, because I want to be able to put the video up on YouTube in the next couple days for people. So let me fix that right now. I was a little early on that. All right, if you refresh, you should be able to do that now. But anyway, there's a link in the thank you at the end of you submitting your form that you can use to access your PD certificate for today. We are planning some future sessions. You'll notice by some of the questions that we have on the exit form, the exit ticket, that we're looking to get some input from you on when would be a good time. We totally understand that everybody's year right now is starting off as some degree of dumpster fire. So in terms of scheduling and whatnot, so we are totally appreciative of that. We don't want to rush anybody into having to continue doubling down, tripling down on this, but we also want to be there to support you and give you the sessions that you feel you need in order to be successful with this. So if you would be very candid and forthright in your feedback on the form to us, that would be fantastic. Because yeah, I knew, Pam, that you were starting pretty soon. I couldn't remember if it was next week or this week. So yeah, so our folks in the county are getting ready to dive in here pretty soon. Barb, when do you guys start? You must be pretty soon as well, right? Oh, you're muted, Barb. Sorry.
Yeah, we start. Teachers start on Monday and students start on Wednesday.
Got it.
Yeah, and we're having a meeting tomorrow, no,
Yep.
Thursday. So plan to start this week.
So we'll be looking at the feedback that you give us about when to look at future sessions and what to look at specifically. And if Josh and I can find the common time to put together some more sessions, we will be very happy to do that. Anyone have any other additional questions? Josh, do you want to have any final thoughts?
I have thought with that, and this is,
Go for it.
I can't remember, is it a, there's not a spot in the exit sheet where they could mention whether they would prefer an evening after school or like a Saturday morning. I don't know if that's, I don't know what that work looks like for you, but that was something that just popped into my head.
Yeah, there is the last question on the exit ticket is anything else that you would like us to know. So that might be a good place for you to stick that. Yeah. If we do a future training, would you prefer afternoon, evening, or even a Saturday? And we might be able to do some sessions where we can take that into account. And remember, we record all of these sessions as well so that you can have access to them later on. But if you could let us know in that last question, that would be great. Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank Josh again for lending his expertise, sharing his slides with us and his expertise in working with this. And he probably would describe it as not expertise, but he certainly has a lot more than I have. So I'm really thankful that he agreed to partner with me on this so that we could hopefully get you some basic information on how to get started with a project like this. Again, many of you have seen them out there, and we just wanted to really make sure that we gave you whatever we could to get you a solid foundation and some basic understanding. And we do encourage you to reach out to both of us for information, additional information, or some troubleshooting if you're running into issues.
And just one more time, I was going to drop that link to this presentation in the chat just to make sure that everyone got them, because I know I dropped it earlier. Some people might have come in later. So that's the presentation. You should be able to view it. And again, there's some of the videos that I put in there are simplified versions of what I showed you, and there's links to those items I was talking about, the microphones and the interfaces and that stuff. So feel free to use that, and I hope that it can be helpful. Again, please feel free to reach out to me, and my contact info is there as well. And yeah.
And I just put in the chat as well for everybody that the YouTube channel where the Maine Department of Education's training videos, this one included, and the one from last week, and any of the other things that I've recorded since, well, probably since around March, are all available. If you go to youtube.com and you search Maine DOE Com, the way I put it in the chat, you'll be able to subscribe to that channel, and then you can go back there and see all the videos. And they have videos on a variety of different content area topics as well. In fact, there's a really fantastic series that my digital learning specialist colleagues have done on like Bitmoji classrooms and guides to best practices for digital teaching and learning. They have a whole multi-module series on there that you may find interesting and informative and helpful as well, depending on what your teaching situation is coming up in the fall.
If you get on the Mainly Music Ed Facebook group, I post these YouTube links there as well as a bunch of others, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But
awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you again, Josh, for your time and talents today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, I'm available to help support you as you're getting ready for your year. And good luck to everyone. Good luck, Pam, tomorrow with your students, all of our friends in the county that are getting started this week and next week. So I wish you all the best, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.